Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ginger Broderick, and I'm the host of the Ginger New York TV show. Welcome to Ginger Fridays here at MNN TV Studios. We are live here in New York City. Today is a really exciting day because it's our first taping in over 20 months. And what better way to celebrate than inviting my great friends, Angela De Niro and her husband, Ron Apria, to the show today. Ron wrote a book on the era that I almost missed, so we're going to be talking a lot about that. Angela is here. Not only is she his wife, but she's my co-pilot today. So thank you very much, Angela, for joining in. And Ron Apria.
Very, very nice. Very good to be here.
Wonderful.
It's been too long.
It has been. It really has been.
And what a better way than to celebrate than inviting you two here to help launch my new season.
Okay.
And we have Chris Drucker that's on the set taking photographs. And he, I understand, is the illustrator graphic designer for your cover.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What a beautiful cover. So we're hoping to catch a few minutes with him later on the show. And welcome.
Thank
So what made you decide to write this book at this point in your life?
Well, I've been putting it off for probably 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Angela's been kind of pushing me to write a book. You know, we sit around having dinner, and I'll be telling her all these crazy stories of my career with different bands that I played with and the stuff that goes on the road, some of the good things, some of the crazy things, some of the nice things. And she's always been saying, you should really write these memoirs down and maybe write a book. And, you know, you're living your life. I had a full schedule of students. I had seven days a week of teaching private students, playing gigs, and with all the craziness of trying to make a living in the music business, I just didn't really have the time to sit down to write. But the pandemic hit, and we had more time than we needed. You know? So after writing several arrangements, I shouldn't say several, I wrote, I think, about 25 or 30 arrangements during this period. And I was kind of getting tired of writing music. I said, I think I'm going to give this book a whack, and I did.
Well, it's really enjoyable. So thank you, Angela, for, nudging him along.
Nudging, nagging is more the instrumental word there. But here's the aside to this. I figured, well, it was maybe November of 2020, and I thought, well, no vaccine, no anything yet. We've got another 6 months to hunker down, and that'll be enough time to maybe get him started. This crazy man wrote it in about one and a half months, and I couldn't believe that he finished it so quickly. It actually irritated me. So it's just how fast he got it. Because I'm jealous. I'm always impressed by how quickly you get things done when you set your mind to them.
You're a jazz musician, composer, arranger, saxophonist, among other things. Really, I really had an enjoyable time reading the book because I've known you guys for a while. I was familiar with a lot of the stories more towards the end of the book, but I really enjoyed reading a lot of your story in detail. And I understand now why you talk so much about Frank Foster, because he was a real integral part of your whole life and career.
Sure was. Yeah, he goes. My friendship with Frank goes back to 50s, when I was, just about old enough to get into nightclubs. I had just turned 18. I lived in Astoria in them days, and I got my driver's license. And I would drive into Manhattan. I would go to Birdland. Birdland was on Broadway in them days, and I always loved Basie's band. Although I caught all the great bands down there, whether it be Buddy Rich or Maynard Ferguson or Duke Ellington's band, but Basie's band was always my favorite band. And one night I went down with a couple of friends of mine to hear Basie's band, and I met Frank Foster. And it's kind of interesting how it worked out. He was, in my mind, the star of that band. He was world famous already, jazz saxophone player, tenor player, and he did most of those great Basie arrangements. So in my mind, he was the star of that band. Although the band was loaded with great players and great musicians, but he was my favorite. So a photographer girl came around to take pictures. In them days, every club had a photographer girl, and she came around with a camera and wanted to take a picture of me and my two friends. And I remember asking her, almost half jokingly, can you bring Frank Foster over and get him in the picture? And she didn't answer. And then the band starts coming out, getting ready to play, and she just walks away. And I'm thinking that's a no. So we sat around. We caught that set, and the band was killing. Frank just blew the place apart. He sounded so great. And after the set, we're getting ready to leave, and who comes walking by? The photographer girl with Frank. And that was the start. That's where our friendship started, and that friendship lasted, for the rest of his life. He passed away a few years back.
And he gave you all so many arrangements. I mean, out of the goodness of his heart, that was. Tell the time of. I'm sorry. May I?
No.
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell the story about when you had asked him just for extra. You were running a band, your own big band at the time, and you really just had stock arrangements. They were just things that you could buy. But you wanted to add a little bit to it, so you were asking him basically, I guess, for extras, old arrangements.
Well, yeah, I had my own big band, one of my first big bands, and in them days, I wasn't an arranger. I didn't know how to write music yet, arrange music, I should say. So we were buying these stock arrangements, and I had a decent book of arrangements. I had probably a couple of dozen, but they all sounded kind of similar. Nothing great. So when I was talking with Frank that night in Birdland, I mentioned that to him, that I had a band, and we were getting tired of playing the stock arrangements. Did he have any old scores that he might want to part with, And he said, sure, I can probably dig up a couple for you. And that was on a Saturday night, and he asked me to come back like on Wednesday. He said, come back Wednesday night, he says, and I'll have some music for you. So the friends that I was with, Johnny Dogus and Vinny Gagliotti, they didn't want to go back on Wednesday, so I went back by myself. And Frank comes running down the Birdland steps. He was always late. Frank was just such a beautiful guy, but his big hang-up, and he knew it. He was having a problem with his tardiness for his entire career. So he comes running down the steps. He's a little bit late. And he sees me at the bar, and he comes running over to the bar, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "I forgot to bring the music." He says, "But don't leave." He says, I don't want you to go home empty-handed." Those are the words he used. And 5 minutes later, I see him standing in front of the band, and I see everybody passing up music. And I'm looking at all these. These are all my idols: Marshall Royal and Snooky Young and Sonny Payne, and all these great players. I see them all pulling music out and passing it up to Frank. And I'm thinking, hey, this can't be for me. I was a kid. I was like 18 at the time, I guess. And sure enough, after the set, he comes over and he hands me an arrangement. He says,
Isn't that unbelievable?
I read that in the book, and I just shook my head. That was one story I'd never heard of, but it was wonderful.
yeah. And he didn't know me. I mean, he knew only, the little bit that we talked the prior time we got together with the photographer, and I was impressed by how responsible he felt to give me a hand, And so that's where the friendship started.
And it continued.
It continued.
Right till the,
It continued for 20 years. I mean, every time he came in town, well, I would always go hear the band, and he would invite me up to his place. He lived on Central Park West with his wife and kids, and he would invite me up to his house, and I'd go up there, and he'd go through a pile of music, and I was really asking him for his old stuff. I never thought in a million years he would pull out and give me the music that they were just recording, the newest things. In fact, one of them, he said, "Be careful with this." He says hasn't been copyrighted yet. I'm thinking, wow, and of course these were the scores. The parts had to be copied, and I didn't know how to copy music in them days, so I had to learn. So my original manuscript was pretty terrible, actually.
It's okay.
And,
Fun to look at.
Do you still have those pages?
I still do, yeah. Many of them I still have the original manuscript. And what a blessing that was, though. I think to play that great music, I'll learn how to copy it, So
I
so
just
I
have
did.
to correct you for one thing. You said a 20-year friendship. Your friendship spanned until...
No,
Yeah.
decades, 5 decades.
Yeah.
And the friendship went into it went through different stages. I was a fan.
Yeah, for 20 years.
He was the international star. I was a kid. And as the years went by, when he left the Basie band, I became part of his band. I even helped him copy music for his new band because my copying had gotten better by then. And I helped him put a band together. I knew a lot of the good musicians in New York, so I helped him put his band together, and I was part of that band for a few years. So it went through different things. He wound up playing at our wedding, and I mean,
Wow.
we got really close.
That's amazing. How old do you think he was around that time that you met him? If you were 18.
Well, he was 9 years older than me.
Okay. So he
Yeah.
was young himself.
Yeah. And he used to send me postcards from all over the world.
Wow.
And,
exciting.
I had never traveled outside of New York City.
Uh-huh.
And I was getting these cards from France and all different places in Europe and other parts of the world. And what a kick that was, getting
Sure.
these cards from Frank, from all these foreign places. It was cool.
I'm sure he appreciated your friendship too.
Yeah, we had, believe it or not, we had a lot in common. I was always kind of shy, and he knew that. He knew that just by how overwhelmed I was. When the first conversation, I was
Excuse
like,
me, you have a very beautiful wife. You can't be very shy with someone so beautiful as her.
well,
That was sweet of you. but-
this was,
I'm sorry for interrupting.
I had gotten rid of some of that shyness by the time I met her. But and Frank
You ain't fooling me.
also was a little bit on the shy side,
Uh-huh.
and so there was some similarities in our personalities, I think. And he took a shine to me, and people ask me like, why would he give you all that music?
Oh, yes. Uncopyrighted.
I
yeah.
don't know. I really don't know. I'm just assuming that he liked me, and I was happy that I had such a good friend. It was cool.
And there are lots of different places in the book kind of, chronicles that, where the friendship kind of, it flips back and forth throughout the decades. There were times when Ronnie was able to, whatever he could do for Frank, he would. And there were times when he was able to give him a hand with certain things, whether it was getting gigs or being part of a band or
Or recovering an album that got lost.
That's right. That's a great story.
He had recorded an album. I don't know how many years prior, maybe 15 or 20 years prior.
Well,
And he ran out of money. And now they had a few bucks. He was getting some royalties, and him and Cecilia, his wife, called us up one night and explained the situation. They were in the middle of this project. They had done all the recording. The recording was all done, but they didn't have enough money to finish the project. And they wanted to see if they can find the tapes, and all they had was the name of the engineer, and they weren't even sure if he was even still alive, because it was so many years prior. And so we had his name, and Angela is good at this. She did a search, an internet search, and she came up with about 100 names. I forget what his name was, but there were a lot of people with the same name. So we had this list, and I was prepared to spend a day calling people to see if we can track down Frank's tapes. And the first call I made was, I said, let's start with Long Island, since the guy lived on Long Island at the time. So we called this 516 number. And first call, boom, it was the guy. And we found his tapes, and we got them back. And he wound up completing that album, and it was a great album. It's entitled Well Water. And they brought it over to the Bennett Studios in New Jersey, and they had to actually bake the tapes, because when they sit, the oil-based tapes, and when they sit for all those years, there's a chance that you can only play them once. The tape sticks together and it gets gummy. So before they even tried to play it, they go through a baking process, and they were able to do that and save the tapes. So after the project was over, Frank and Cecilia said, "Oh, we're so grateful, Ron. What could we do for you? What do we owe you?" I said, "You owe me nothing." I said, "Do me a favor, just put my name on a line of notes that I found the tapes for you," and that's what they did.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
How long were those tapes missing? Or
20 years maybe. Yeah, and they were great. I mean, they were classics. He had people like Elvin Jones playing drums, and all these wonderful musicians on this thing. And as what happens a lot of times, you run out of money, you can't finish the project, and
it's wonderful the fellow still had the tapes.
yeah.
speaking of Elvin Jones, one of the world's greatest drummers. So Ron was in Frank's band for, I guess, on and off a couple of years. Frank had his own big band, and you used to make rehearsals and everything, and there would be, musicians come and go, who can be there, who can't, and they were actually getting ready for the Left Bank Jazz Society gig, right? And
Yeah.
they had a new drummer.
Yeah, we had a new drummer. Frank always had good drummers.
I love drummers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank always had good
Noted.
drummers. And I had missed a bunch of rehearsals, and there was some new people in the band. And I remember making this rehearsal. It was up in a loft, down, I think it was down a village somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but it was kind of a dark room. And I only saw the drummer's back while he was setting up his drums. And of course, the saxes are facing the other way. So I sat down through the rehearsal. I never really got a good look at the drummer, but he was screwing everything up. He was missing all the hits. There's a certain way to play with big bands. You have to read and you have to catch those brass hits, and he was missing a lot of them and just sounding terrible. So after the rehearsal, I said to Frank, "Are you going to keep this drummer?" I said, "He's like really not making it, So Frank says, he says, "Elvin's going to be good when he learns the parts."
It was Elvin Jones.
Oh, my goodness.
It was Elvin Jones. I said, "Wow!" I was playing with Elvin Jones, but he was struggling. He wasn't a great reader, but once he learned the music, as it turned out, he did the gig with us. We went down to Baltimore and did this gig at the Left Bank Jazz Society. And boy, I knew why Frank wanted him in the band. He just was on fire, and it was total pandemonium. I mean, it was one of the more memorable gigs that Frank or I ever did. It was an incredible, beautiful concert we did, and Elvin was a big reason why.
And we met up with Elvin was it the Blue Note? Frank was doing a gig at the Blue Note with Elvin many years later. This is like maybe late 90s, I'm not sure. Maybe late 90s. And we were up in the band room talking to him, and he actually remembered that gig at the Left Bank Jazz
Oh, isn't
Society.
that
Elvin and
interesting?
Frank, yeah. They both said it was probably one of the most memorable, most exciting gigs they had ever played.
You never forget those
Yeah.
those kinds of happenings. I mean, it was pandemonium. People were the place was packed. Great audience too, and they were just screaming the entire time. It was just,
Wow.
it was crazy. It was the excitement, the energy was something you never forget. So when we got together many years later, a couple of decades later, Frank invited Angela and I to come to the Blue Note, where he was working with Elvin with a small band. And after the set, we went up to the band room, and we were hanging out. And Frank says, "Ron," he says, "meet Elvin." He says, "Oh, wait a second, you guys played together." So we sat there, and most of the time we spent talking about that gig that we did at the Left Bank Jazz Society. It was historic.
So the two of you met around the 80s, early 80s, correct? How did that
1982.
happen?
Well, we were playing in this. I was singing, the band singer for this. Really, it was a big band, and it was not a great band, and it's okay. Everybody has to start somewhere. And he used to do subs for them occasionally. Definitely, what would you say? It wasn't your favorite thing to do, and he kept telling me he had just come back from, I guess, you had just done a tour with Skitch Henderson.
I just got off the road with Skitch Henderson's band, and I reluctantly accepted that gig because I had known Bob Rotunda prior. I had played with his band before you sang with the band. There was another singer that Fran Carroll used to sing with.
Wonderful
his band.
singer.
She's a good singer, and so we were friends. In fact, he did my liner notes for my first album. He was an artist, commercial artist. So when he called me, I took the gig. I wasn't really in the mood to do it. I was producing my first album. I was in the middle of my production for Positive Energy, and I had just got off the road with Skitch Henderson's band, and I had enough money to finish my album, so I was excited about doing that. So when Bob called, I didn't really want to do it, but because we were friends and because he was doing my album design, I took the gig. And a couple of times I was tempted to call him back and cancel, and I didn't.
Glad you didn't.
And so I remember Terrace on the Park was the gig, was the place where we worked, and I remember sitting in the sax section getting ready for the gig to start, and the saxophone player next to me starts a conversation with me and asks me what I've been doing, And I said, I just got off the road with Skitch Henderson's band. I just finished a tour. He said, no, really? He said, well, who was in the band? I said, well, I was rooming with another saxophone player named Steve Greenfield. So Angela's sitting right in front of me, getting ready, for the gig. And she says, Steve Greenfield. She turns around and says, I went to school with him.
Oh, isn't that incredible?
My high school, yeah.
So
That was
was
cool.
the icebreaker,
wonderful.
and that started the conversation, and that's basically how we met with Barbara Tunder's band.
And we hung out the rest of the night between breaks and everything. And then I don't know how you'd gotten dropped off or something, and I was driving someone else also. And we carpooled back. I drove you back. Almost got us killed that night too on the Cross Island Parkway.
Yeah, that was-
It wasn't my fault. So, but,
Yeah, that was funny. I'm thinking, I don't want to die now. I got an album coming out.
I know it was so not my
What
fault.
a dumb time to get killed. So,
It's been a wild ride since then. I
It really
understand.
has. Oh,
35 years? something?
Yeah, 35 years, and we moved back into the city into Forest Hills, and when we were buying our place, we loved this terrace. We went out on the terrace to to take a look at the view, and Ron had asked the agent what the heck that building was across from us with a big T on it, and actually, it's Alan Mann, our friend Alan Mann was our agent, and
Oh, yeah.
he told us it was where you two guys met at
Terrace on the Park.
Isn't that incredible?
That sealed the deal. I get to look at it every night.
Full circle for you.
and it's right smack in the middle of our picture
Can't
window.
miss it. Can't miss it.
Well, I follow you on Facebook, and I watch all your photos. And
Oh.
I've seen some of the sunsets over it, and I think it's
Gorgeous,
very,
really.
Yes, it really is. Rana, I understand that you recorded with John Lennon. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah. How much time do we have? 1974. He did an album called Walls and Bridges.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate to get a call to be part of his horn section. He used 5 horns. And called us the Little Big Horns. And I think that was his first album. I'm pretty sure that was his first album with horns. This is, of course, after he had left the Beatles, and he was him and Yoko had split up, and he was living with May Pang at the time. May Pang, as it turns out, we're still very, very close friends. In fact, she lives in Forest Hills, not too far from us.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and but the album with John was great. He was going through a really good period. May had him kind of all straightened out, I think, and cleaned up, and he was basically hooked on fruit drinks and health food and stuff. He was going through a very healthy period, and he looked great, and he was really a sweet guy to work with, and so was May. I mean, it was just two of the nicest people I think I've ever worked with. And the project was different. It was a little scary for me, since there was no music, 5 horns, no music, and so it was all head stuff. A lot of the rock horn players were used to that. They would make up these things as they go, but making them up in a studio is kind of weird because time is money, and there's a lot of hitting and missing going on. So I was a little uncomfortable with that, and it took me a couple of sessions to really kind of get the flow and feel more comfortable. So I'm not sure, it was a couple of weeks we probably spent. We were doing a lot of sessions, triple sessions. And we would finish those sessions 1 or 2, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. This was in the summertime. And after the sessions, him and May would be walking to their apartment, and it was in the same direction as the subway, and I would walk with them. And we had, that's when I really got to know John, during those midnight, I shouldn't say the middle of the night walks. And I was very impressed with how friendly he was and how open he was with everybody. He waved to truck drivers and kneeled down and talked to homeless people. And I'm thinking, wow, that's great. And I appreciated that, but I was worried for him. 1974, it's a lot of crime and no bodyguards, no way of protecting him. So I'm thinking, this is kind of a dangerous lifestyle that he's living here, and I was a little bit worried about that. But I appreciated his friendliness with everybody, and he seemed to get a good feel out surprising people. People turn around and say,
Wait, was that John?
John Lennon. And he would just smile and put his arm around him. Yeah, man, it's me. But one story I guess I should tell is the photostat story. Since we had no music, I was photostatting some of his lead sheets. Lead sheets, for the people who don't know, are sheets with the vocal part and the chords and the key, of course, that you're in. And it gives us an idea of what we're doing, what kind of tune we're playing. Helps us come up with some ideas to play the horn parts. So I grabbed his lead sheets, and I went into another room and photostated them for each member of the horn section. 5 of us, so I'd make 5 copies of each lead sheet. But I'm in the middle of copying these sheets, and John comes walking in the room. He walks over to the photostat machine, takes the music out, sticks his face in, and he hits the button. And Steve was with me, Steve David, trumpet player, and we looked at each other like, what is he doing? And like, whoa, and the lights went off, and we're covering our eyes. And he's got his face right in it.
Crazy.
So 2 blinding lights later, a couple of photostat pitches come sliding out with his nose a little flat and his glasses still on and everything. And he takes them and he hands one to Steve and he hands one to me. And he says, hang on to these. He says, someday these are going to be worth a lot of money. And he walks out of the room and Steve and I are looking at each other. What's going on? Guy risks his eyesight to hand us a couple of photostats. But, and I was still kind of like a little tense about the session, and I'm not sure I even appreciated as much as I should have what just happened. So I rolled it up, I stuck it in my saxophone case, and we went back in and finished the session. And I didn't realize until probably a day or two later, I pulled it out of my case. I said, this is really pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I put it in a frame, and it's been hanging on my wall since 1974.
Well, I have a copy of that copy.
I know.
Yeah,
I
thank
know.
you very much for that great gift. I really appreciate it.
And that's kind of the reason you guys met originally, because many years later, you had gotten a call to do that Return to Bangladesh thing. Kenny Forgione had given you a call, and he got you back with May Pang, reacquainted. And that was the night that Ginger was there. She was covering the show.
That's right.
Also, and came back and asked you to do a show with her. And then the reason he ended up doing the album, I think, is really because you started, he came out, he knew you liked the Beatles. He had done a little arrangement on Imagine that he played for your show. And when he came off the stage, you were crying. And he thought, wow, he said there is an audience for people
yes.
for this kind of music. Even with that jazz influence, people just love the song so much. There's so much a part of their history and their life. So thank you.
And you went on to make a new album. You made you did a research of all of John's songs
Exactly.
and how they could be translated into a jazz format.
Yep.
And then created that. And you're on the album. And
Oh, just for a little smidgen of time.
and your son too.
Well, Matt, sure. Our son Matt, Ron wrote all these wonderful obligatos.
Well, we had a
and
string
solos.
section.
We had and a string section.
I put a full string section on that
Beautiful
album.
piece of
and-
work.
And I put my kid to work, and he sounded great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful contribution to the jazz world, and I understand that you got written up a lot of PR from that album.
Yeah. Well, it was up for Grammy.
And you got a 4-star.
I
Review
got
from
a
Downbeat.
4-star
That's
review
good.
from Downbeat. That was my Grammy. I didn't win a Grammy, but if I had a choice of a 4-star review in Downbeat or a Grammy, I would take the 4-star review in Downbeat.
That's
And
great.
you got it.
I was really, really pleased that they liked that album because it was a little risky, taking tunes that were, rock tunes, and also adding strings. There's something about jazz albums with strings that usually get panned. I know Charlie Parker, when he recorded with strings, the reviews were terrible, and not too many jazz artists have had luck recording with strings. But I didn't care. I was doing what I was hearing. I was hearing strings, and I said, I'm going to do the album. So when I got that review, I was really pleased.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We're going to need to wrap up our show. It's so wonderful to have you here, and Angela for
Thanks for
joining me
inviting me
as
to
my
be part of
co-host, my co-pilot.
Thank you.
We were pretty easy on you, weren't we?
No black and blue marks.
I'll work them over at home later. It's okay. Oh, we're going to be.
Wait, let me just say
Doing
this.
the good
It's always easy being on your show. You
Oh,
are so
great.
great to
Wonderful.
to do these kinds of things with. I mean, it's so comfortable, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for
very
inviting
much.
me too. It was a pleasure.
So how do people find you? Where can people buy your book, your album? And you also, I understand, have an upcoming show at Birdland. That's exciting. Can you tell us about that?
It was confirmed 10 minutes before we came on the air, actually. This is all. Yeah, I've been wanting to officially release this book at Birdland. We were playing at Birdland kind of regular before the pandemic. We had finished our 4th performance there. And after I wrote the book, I'm thinking, boy, it would be so nice to have a big release party at Birdland. Wouldn't that be cool? So we just got the call this morning. You know, because of the pandemic, no big bands have really been doing much at Birdland right now. So and January 9th, I believe,
Sunday, January 9th at 5:30, I think is the show.
5:30, I'll be there with my big band, with Angela, and we're going to have a big book release
Congratulations.
on that day. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm
You'll be
There,
there?
I almost said. Yes, I've already got it in my calendar, right?
Cool.
Very good. Congratulations. And where do people find you? Where's your website?
Yeah, my website, www.ronaprea, RONAPREA.com.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Physical copies and ebooks now. We have ebook downloads that you can get. so-
Wonderful.
Yeah, and
It's a-
lots of wonderful pictures. And that, I think, is really the neat part of it all. All right, everything's
Yeah.
documented with
Yeah.
photographs, which is cool.
And a lot of them came from Ginger, New York, too.
That's
So thank
right.
you.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me a chapter in your book. That's wonderful. Okay. So I just want to thank everyone for joining in to this afternoon's show of Ginger, New York. Make sure you get out and buy the book, The Era I Almost Missed, by Ron Aprea. Aprea! I got it. And thank you again, Angela, for joining in this
Thank you,
afternoon's
Ginger.
show. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.